Something has changed around Alexandra Eala. Not long ago, she was one of the most exciting young players in women's tennis. A rising name, a player with enormous potential, and a growing following in the Philippines. Now, every tournament feels different. The attention is bigger. The crowds are louder. The expectations are higher. And as Eala heads toward the Cincinnati Open in Ohio, the question is no longer simply whether she can win another match. It is this: how far can Eala Mania actually go? Her recent run has transformed the way the tennis world sees her. After a breakthrough championship run in Washington, Eala defeated American star Jessica Pegula in the final, winning her first W-level singles title and reaching a career-high ranking of number 20, according to the information provided for this story. But the momentum didn't stop there. She arrived in Toronto carrying the confidence of a champion, and then another American opponent fell. Then another, Jessica Pegula, Alicia Parks, Katie McNally, 3 American opponents across the recent stretch, and Eala continued to attract attention with her aggressive tennis and fearless mentality. But here's where this story gets even more interesting, because Cincinnati isn't simply the next tournament on her schedule. It could become the next major stage for a phenomenon that is rapidly growing beyond tennis itself. Eala Mania is heading to Ohio, and if the scenes surrounding Eala in Washington and Toronto are any indication, Cincinnati may be about to experience something very different, because this time, Alexandra Eala isn't arriving as an unknown prospect. She's arriving as a champion, and thousands of Filipino supporters are ready to make sure everyone knows it. The Cincinnati Open now becomes the next test of whether Alexandra Eala's recent surge is simply a hot streak, or the beginning of something much bigger. According to the information provided, Eala is listed in the Cincinnati Open field, with a tournament scheduled for August 13th through August 23rd. And that timing matters, because Eala isn't entering Ohio quietly. She is coming in with momentum from Washington, attention from Toronto, and a rapidly expanding international fan base that has turned her matches into major events. The Washington Championship was a moment everything changed. Eala faced Jessica Pegula, an American star, and a major test on one of the biggest stages of her young career. After dropping the opening set, Eala didn't disappear. Instead, she fought her way back into the match, won the second set, and took control of the deciding stage. The crucial stretch came late. According to the supplied information, Eala won 10 of the final 13 games of the championship match. That isn't just about surviving an opponent. That's about responding under pressure. And it revealed something important about Eala's game. When the match becomes uncomfortable, she doesn't necessarily become smaller. She can become more dangerous. Then came Toronto. The expectation was already rising, but Eala had another challenge waiting for her. Alicia Parks became another American opponent in her path, followed by Katie McNally in a demanding 3-set battle. Suddenly, the conversation around Eala wasn't only about one championship. It was about consistency. Could she carry the confidence from Washington into another tournament? Could she continue beating established opposition? Could she handle the attention that was growing around her? So far, the answer has been compelling. And there's another factor making Eala's rise impossible to ignore: her supporters. The Filipino fan base has become part of the story itself. At Eala's matches, the tennis isn't happening in isolation. Filipino flags, passionate cheers, cameras, and fans waiting to see their rising star have created an atmosphere that makes her appearances feel like major occasions. That support was already visible before the Washington breakthrough. The supplied information says Eala received nearly 90% of the fan vote in the WTA Star of the Swing voting. Whether you're looking at the results, the crowds, or the online attention, one thing is becoming increasingly difficult to deny. Eala has built something bigger than a ranking. She's built anticipation. And now that anticipation is moving to Ohio. But Cincinnati will ask a different question. Can Eala turn the excitement surrounding her into another deep run? Because the pressure will be different now. Opponents know her name. Fans expect more. And every match comes with a little more attention than the one before. That's what happens when a rising player stops being a surprise and starts becoming a target. And in Cincinnati, Eala may discover just how different life is when the entire tennis world is watching. This is where the Eala story becomes bigger than a single tournament, because the most important change isn't necessarily happening in the rankings. It's happening in perception. Opponents are no longer looking at Alexandra Eala as simply a young player with potential. After her breakthrough in Washington and the momentum that followed, she has given the tour a reason to take her seriously right now. And that changes the tactical battle before the first ball is even struck. A player facing Eala in Cincinnati knows she can absorb pressure. She knows how to respond after losing a set. And perhaps most importantly, she now has recent experience of closing out a major opportunity against a high-level opponent. That confidence can be extremely valuable. But confidence alone doesn't win matches. Cincinnati will test whether Eala can maintain the same level while carrying completely different expectations. There's a huge difference between chasing a breakthrough and defending one. When nobody expects you to win, every victory feels like a bonus. When you've already proven you can beat a major opponent, every new match comes with a different question. Can you do it again? That is a challenge Eala now faces. Her recent run also highlights one of the most intriguing parts of her rise, the combination of youth, fearlessness, and growing experience. She isn't supposed to have everything figured out yet. She's still developing. There will be difficult matches. There will be days when her timing isn't perfect. There will be opponents who find ways to disrupt her rhythm. And that's exactly why Cincinnati matters. A great tournament run isn't only about how a player performs when everything is going right. It's about what happens when the momentum disappears. Can Eala stay patient? Can she adjust when an opponent changes tactics? Can she remain aggressive without rushing? Can she handle the pressure created by her own growing popularity? Those questions will be just as important as the final score. And then there's the American storyline. Her recent victories over American opposition have naturally added another layer of intrigue to her arrival in Ohio. Pegula was the biggest example, but Parks and McNally added to the narrative. Still, it would be a mistake to turn that into a simple Eala versus America storyline. Tennis doesn't work that way. Every opponent brings a different style, a different strategy, and a different challenge. The real story is that Eala has shown she can compete against players who have already established themselves at the highest level. And now the rest of the field has to respond. That's what happens when a breakthrough player becomes a genuine threat. The scouting changes. The preparation changes. The expectations change. And suddenly, the player who was once trying to get noticed is the player everyone wants to figure out. That's the stage Eala is entering in Cincinnati. But there's another side to this story that may be even more powerful. Because while the tennis world is watching Eala's results, Filipino fans are turning her journey into something much larger. Her success is becoming a shared experience. Washington wasn't just a trophy. Toronto wasn't just another tournament. And Cincinnati may not feel like just another stop on the calendar. For Filipino supporters, every Eala appearance has become an opportunity to celebrate a player who is carrying their hopes onto one of the biggest stages in tennis. And that brings us to the biggest question of all. What happens when Eala Mania meets Cincinnati? Because if the momentum continues, Ohio may not simply be the next chapter. It could be the moment the entire tennis world realizes that Alexandra Eala has entered a completely new phase of her career. Now comes the bigger picture. Alexandra Eala arrives in Cincinnati with something every young athlete dreams about: momentum. But momentum is temporary. What can last is belief. And that may be the most important thing Eala has gained from this recent stretch. She has already experienced the pressure of a championship match. She has already discovered what it feels like to defeat a major opponent when the stakes are at their highest. And she has already seen how quickly the attention can explode when a breakthrough becomes reality. Cincinnati gives her another opportunity to prove that Washington wasn't an isolated moment. But there is no guarantee. The field is deep. The opponents are dangerous. And every player will have the same goal: win. That's why expectations around Eala should remain balanced. She doesn't need to win every tournament to prove that she belongs. She doesn't need to beat every American opponent. And she certainly doesn't need to carry an entire nation on her shoulders every time she walks onto a tennis court. What matters is the progression, the experience, the ability to learn from difficult matches and come back stronger. That is how a promising young player becomes an established star. And right now, Eala has given fans plenty of reasons to believe that her ceiling is extremely high. Her recent success has also created something that cannot be measured by rankings alone: connection. When Filipino fans see those flags in the stand, hear the cheers, and watch Eala compete on an international stage, they aren't simply watching another tennis match. They're watching someone from their community step onto one of the biggest stages in the sport. That's why the phrase Eala Mania has become so powerful. It represents excitement, but it also represents belief. And as Cincinnati approaches, that belief is traveling with her. So when Alexandra Eala walks onto the court in Ohio, don't just watch the score. Watch the reaction. Watch the crowd. Watch how opponents respond to the player who has suddenly become one of the most talked about young names in women's tennis. Because the most fascinating part of Eala's story may not be what she has already accomplished. It may be what happens next. Washington showed the world she could break through. Toronto showed that the momentum could continue. Now Cincinnati offers another chance, another test, another stage, and another opportunity for Alexandra Eala to show that this isn't just a moment. This is the beginning of something much bigger. Eala Mania has reached Ohio, and the tennis world is watching.